Gene Hackman and his wife Betsy died tragically. And it's not what you think, and it actually pertains to hospice.
The mysterious death of Gene Hackman and his wife, Betsy Arakawa, remains a hot topic for speculative theories and Hollywood conspiracy tales. However, the FBI's latest discovery has completely altered the case. While sorting through Hackman's belongings, a crumpled piece of paper was found on his desk. Its contents were filled with chaotic, disjointed, yet haunting scribbles, and the name Leslie, his daughter, was repeated multiple times, revealing a shocking truth about Betsy's death. Could what Hackman wrote be the truth, or merely the hallucinations of an old man in a state of panic? Or is this the final puzzle piece that exposes a reality more ruthless than anyone could have imagined? Let's uncover the truth in today's video. 1. The final letter. When the Santa Fe police entered Gene Hackman's sprawling mansion on February 26, they had no idea they were about to uncover one of the most haunting stories of solitude and family tragedy. Gene Hackman, a Hollywood icon, was found motionless on the floor, his cane and signature sunglasses lying beside him. His face appeared calm, yet his half-closed eyes carried an inexplicable sorrow. Not far from him, in the bathroom, his wife, Betsy Arakawa, was also discovered lifeless. All initial signs suggested that there was no foul play, no signs of forced entry, no struggle, no violence. The eerie silence that filled the house made the officers uneasy, sensing that something was amiss. At first, the police concluded that this was a case of natural causes. Betsy had passed away first, and Gene Hackman, weakened by old age and Alzheimer's, may have failed to comprehend reality, leading to his gradual deterioration in the days that followed. However, everything took a shocking turn when they found an unsent letter on Hackman's desk. The FBI was quickly called in, as the contents of the letter were not just the incoherent ramblings of a man losing his memory, it seemed to be an invisible accusation, an untold truth waiting to be unveiled. Despite the erratic handwriting, key sentences in the letter stood out, sending chills down the investigators' spines. Betsy is cold, but no one helped. I let Leslie into the house. I'm not sure. Did I do the right thing? Something is wrong. I can't remember. What particularly caught the FBI's attention was the name Leslie Hackman, Gene Hackman's daughter from his first marriage. She had not been mentioned in the initial reports, yet the letter raised a crucial question: was Leslie Hackman present in the mansion on the day Betsy died? If so, what was her role in the events that unfolded? Did Gene Hackman write this letter in a desperate attempt to reveal something before Alzheimer's erased his ability to remember? A series of theories began to surface. If Leslie was indeed in the mansion on February 11th, was she involved in Betsy's death? Or was she simply a witness who walked away without offering help? The letter did not provide a direct answer, but it was enough for the FBI to launch a deeper investigation. They needed to clarify Leslie's relationship with her stepmother, re-examine the traces left at the scene, and determine whether Leslie had any connection to the final days of Gene Hackman's life. 2. The strained relationship between Leslie Hackman and Betsy Arakawa. The strained relationship between Leslie Hackman and Betsy Arakawa. Every tragedy has its origins, and in this story, the relationship between Leslie Hackman and Betsy Arakawa is one of the key factors leading to the confusion in Gene Hackman's final days. To fully understand Leslie's role in this tragic event, it is essential to look deep into the Hackman family history, where fractures had existed long before his passing. Leslie Hackman, born in 1966, was Gene Hackman's eldest daughter from his first marriage to Faye Maltese. As Leslie grew up, Gene had already entered Hollywood and immersed himself in the film industry, which meant he spent very little time with his daughter. While Leslie's mother raised her, Gene was rarely home, always preoccupied with a demanding filming schedule. This emotional distance not only created a void between father and daughter but also made Leslie feel like an outsider in Gene's life. When he divorced Faye Maltese in 1986, Leslie was already 20 years old, but the separation of her parents only deepened her already distant relationship with Gene. Not long after the divorce, Gene remarried Betsy Arakawa, a former pianist nearly 30 years his junior. However, instead of accepting her father's new wife, Leslie remained distant and somewhat resentful. To Leslie, Betsy was not just a new wife, she was the woman who had taken her father, a man she had already struggled to connect with. The relationship between Leslie and Betsy never improved, even when Gene tried to ease the tension. Betsy Arakawa was a quiet but strong-willed woman. Coming from a disciplined background as a pianist, she was not only Gene Hackman's wife but also someone who significantly influenced his major life decisions. She had no children of her own and perhaps never truly considered Leslie as part of the family. The rare family dinners where all three were present were always filled with tension, as Leslie kept her distance and did not hide her discomfort with Betsy. For years, Leslie Hackman rarely visited her father. Her appearances were limited to special occasions like Christmas or birthdays, and each visit only intensified the underlying tension in the household. Leslie felt that Betsy was deliberately keeping her away from Gene, controlling him, and alienating him from his daughter. On the other hand, Betsy felt that Leslie never genuinely wanted to accept her as part of the family. However, the real conflict between these two women only truly escalated as Gene Hackman aged. In his later years, he was no longer the strong, independent man he once was. He gradually became dependent on Betsy, both physically and emotionally. Gene Hackman's close friends noticed a significant change in him. From a tough, independent man, he became quieter, withdrew from social activities, and almost stopped making his own decisions. Not only Leslie but even many of Gene Hackman's close friends gradually noticed a transformation in him after marrying Betsy. Gene Hackman, from a strong-willed man to someone easily controlled before marrying Betsy, Gene Hackman was known for his autonomy, independence, and decisiveness. He took full control of his career, made firm decisions about film projects, and lived a life where no one dictated his actions. However, in his later years, many friends observed that he had become increasingly dependent on Betsy, not only physically but also psychologically. Meetings with old friends became rare, and those who were once close to Gene Hackman felt that he had lost the sharpness in his thinking. When asked about Gene, longtime friend and director Peter Ryan once said, "That's not the Gene I knew. He has changed. He lets Betsy decide everything." One of Leslie's biggest concerns was Betsy's absolute control over Gene Hackman's finances and financial decisions. As Gene grew weaker with age and Alzheimer's disease, Betsy managed everything on his behalf, from real estate to personal investments. This raised suspicions that Gene had lost control over his own life and was entirely dependent on Betsy. Around 2018, Leslie attempted to warn her father that Betsy was exerting too much control over him. She candidly brought up the issue with Gene during a rare family dinner. However, instead of understanding, Gene reacted defensively and staunchly defended Betsy. "Betsy has always taken care of me. She has done nothing wrong," Gene told Leslie. Leslie was furious that her father did not recognize the reality, while Betsy merely sat silently, smiling confidently. After that argument, Leslie visited her father less frequently, and whenever she tried to reach out, Betsy would always have an excuse: Gene was busy, unwell, or did not want visitors. Over time, Leslie realized that she no longer had access to her father. The biggest turning point occurred in early 2023 when Gene Hackman's health deteriorated significantly. Leslie attempted to visit the mansion to see her father, but Betsy claimed that he did not want to see anyone. This was the breaking point. Leslie could not believe that Gene truly wanted to sever his relationship with her, but in his eyes at the time, Betsy was the only one by his side. The relationship between Leslie and Betsy had completely fallen apart before Gene Hackman passed away. When the FBI discovered Gene's final letter, they could not overlook the fact that he had mentioned Leslie with a tone of confusion and distress. Did he suspect something in his final days? Did he realize Betsy's control and Leslie's indifference but was unable to do anything about it? Based on the evidence gathered by the FBI, it appeared that Leslie Hackman had been present at her father's mansion on the fateful day of February 11th. This was something she had never mentioned in any interviews or statements to the police. The FBI found traces of a woman's shoe prints in the kitchen, an initially overlooked detail because no one had considered the possibility of an outsider. However, upon further forensic analysis, experts determined that these prints did not match Betsy's shoe size but were much closer to Leslie Hackman's measurements. Furthermore, security cameras near the mansion recorded footage of an unidentified car appearing near Hackman's residence on February 11th. Initially, the police believed this might have been a coincidence, but upon further investigation, they discovered that the car was registered to someone directly connected to Leslie Hackman. The critical question now was, if Leslie was truly at the mansion on February 11th, why had she never mentioned it? Could she have visited her father, witnessed something, but chosen to remain silent? Could she have had an argument with Betsy before Betsy's health suddenly declined? And if so, did Gene Hackman attempt to write the letter as an accusation but was unable to clearly remember what had happened? As the investigation deepened, the FBI realized that this case was far more complex than an ordinary family tragedy. It was a story of neglect, years of unresolved resentment between a stepmother and a stepdaughter, and most importantly, a man trapped between two women who never truly accepted each other. Gene Hackman's final letter was more than just scribbles on a piece of paper. It may have been his last desperate attempt to record a truth that he recognized but could no longer articulate. If Leslie Hackman was indeed at the scene that day, what really happened between her and Betsy? This was the question that the FBI had to answer, because that answer could change everything about how this case was perceived. 3. The details that exposed Leslie Hackman. The details exposing Leslie Hackman. When the FBI first discovered the letter on Gene Hackman's desk, they did not initially consider it to be a significant piece of evidence. Given Hackman's condition, an elderly man in the late stages of Alzheimer's, police initially assumed that it was nothing more than meaningless scribbles, a vague attempt by a deteriorating mind to record fragmented thoughts. However, upon closer analysis, experts realized that the letter was not just a sheet of incoherent writing but possibly the key to uncovering an untold truth about Hackman's final days and his wife's death. The letter, though disjointed and lacking a coherent sequence, contained disturbingly clear phrases. 3 sentences particularly caught the FBI's attention. Someone was here. I remember Leslie. I can't remember, but something is not right. Betsy is cold, but no one helped. The wording in the letter suggested that Hackman had a faint memory of what happened when Betsy died. However, due to Alzheimer's, his recollection was too unstable to clearly describe the event. He seemed to be aware that someone had been in the house during the critical timeframe, and that person was Leslie Hackman. As the FBI pieced together the evidence they had gathered, a picture began to emerge. A set of women's shoe prints had been found in the kitchen area, raising suspicion early on. Initially, police assumed they were old traces left by Betsy. However, after a more thorough forensic analysis, experts concluded that these prints did not match Betsy's shoe size but were consistent with Leslie Hackman's. More importantly, a security camera near the mansion also captured an unfamiliar car appearing at the residence on February 11th. When the FBI retrieved the vehicle registration data, they discovered that the car belonged to someone connected to Leslie. The key question now was, why had Leslie never mentioned being at her father's mansion that day? If she had visited her father for an innocent reason, why did she hide this information? If she had nothing to conceal, why did she not report her visit to the police? Alzheimer's makes it difficult for those afflicted to recall events they have witnessed, but it does not erase the most impactful memories. Patients with Alzheimer's often retain memories of experiences that left a strong impression, even if they cannot articulate them clearly. The fact that Gene Hackman mentioned Leslie in his letter suggested that he had a strong impression of her presence at the critical moment, something that could not be dismissed as mere coincidence. The next major question the FBI considered was the timeframe in which Gene Hackman wrote this letter. Based on forensic evidence in the mansion, investigators believe the letter had been written between February 12 and February 15, just days after Betsy's death. During this period, Gene Hackman was completely isolated from the outside world. Without a mobile phone, without email access, and without regular visitors, he was trapped inside his own home with no one to help him. For an Alzheimer's patient, time becomes a chaotic loop where old and new memories blend together. However, there seemed to be a specific moment of clarity, one where Hackman was lucid enough to write down the lines found in the letter. Alzheimer's patients sometimes experience sudden clarity episodes before their condition worsens. These are rare moments when they can recall certain events and express their thoughts more coherently than usual. It was possible that in this fleeting moment, Hackman remembered Leslie being at the mansion on February 11 and sensed that something was not right about her presence. As the investigation progressed, the FBI began to realize that Leslie Hackman's presence at her father's mansion on February 11 was not simply a routine visit. One of the primary theories considered was that Leslie came to discuss financial matters with her father. People close to Gene Hackman had mentioned that there had been ongoing disputes between them over inheritance. Although Hackman loved his daughter, he had made it clear that Betsy was the one who would control his estate in his final years. This decision left Leslie feeling excluded, and it may have driven her to visit the mansion on that fateful day to confront her father and stepmother. Sources close to Gene Hackman revealed that in his later years, he had intended to leave most of his assets to Betsy Arakawa, who had cared for him for years. While Hackman never publicly declared this, the changes in his estate management and inheritance structure had angered Leslie. Although Betsy was only his second wife, Leslie always viewed her as an outsider, someone who had no right to interfere with her father's legacy. This long-standing resentment fueled tensions between Leslie and Betsy over the years. Leslie's sudden appearance at the mansion on February 11 may not have been a coincidence but rather a deliberate confrontation. An internal source suggested that Leslie and Hackman had argued over financial matters in the past. It was plausible that she had come to the mansion that day to convince him to change his will, or at the very least, to have a serious discussion about the issue. The next question was, did Leslie and Betsy have an argument on February 11? Betsy Arakawa was not known as someone who liked confrontation. She maintained a quiet but firm demeanor. Close friends of Gene Hackman noted that Betsy had a strong influence over her husband, particularly in his later years. This led many to believe that she was not just a wife but the true decision-maker in Hackman's final years. If Leslie felt that her father was being controlled, it was entirely possible that she confronted Betsy over financial matters. FBI investigators retraced the movement of Leslie's car through security footage. They noticed that the vehicle linked to Leslie appeared in the early afternoon of February 11 but did not leave until later that evening. This indicated that Leslie had been at the mansion for several hours. If it was just a simple visit, why did she stay for so long? Was there a serious confrontation? If an argument did occur between Leslie and Betsy, what happened afterward? Did Betsy begin to feel unwell following their confrontation? More crucially, if Leslie witnessed her stepmother's health deteriorating, why did she not intervene? When the FBI contacted Leslie after February 11, they noticed something unusual. Her reaction was disturbingly calm. Typically, when a family member dies suddenly, people express shock, grief, or confusion. However, Leslie showed none of these emotions. She answered investigators cautiously, offered minimal information, and seemed to have rehearsed her responses. Another suspicious detail was that after February 11, Leslie made no effort to contact her father. A child with a close relationship with their elderly parent, especially one who is frail and suffering from Alzheimer's, would regularly check in, call, or visit. But Leslie did none of that. She did not call, text, or visit for over a week after Betsy's death. If she genuinely cared about her father, why did she not worry when Gene Hackman had no communication with the outside world? When asked why she had not reached out, Leslie gave a generic response, "I thought he just wanted some quiet time." But this answer made no sense. Gene Hackman did not own a mobile phone, did not use email, and did not have regular visitors. If Leslie truly cared, she would have at least tried to check on him. Her unusual lack of concern made the FBI suspect that she knew more than she was admitting. The FBI considered two main possibilities regarding Leslie's role in Betsy's death. The first was that the medical report confirmed Betsy had died from Hiru's pulmonary syndrome, a severe disease that can progress rapidly. If Betsy had shown symptoms earlier, Leslie may have noticed but chosen not to act. The second possibility was that Leslie's actions could be classified as neglect. If she was present at the scene, witnessed her stepmother in a life-threatening condition, yet decided to leave without calling for help, then while this was not an act of murder, it was still a callous and cruel decision. Due to his Alzheimer's, Gene Hackman may not have fully understood what was happening around him. However, his letter revealed a crucial detail: someone was here. "I remember Leslie." This suggested that Hackman had a fragmented memory of his daughter being present when Betsy was in distress. It was possible that Leslie had arrived, argued with Betsy, and left, unaware that her stepmother would not survive. After Betsy's death, Hackman fell into a state of confusion and disorientation, yet his memory of Leslie's presence remained. This was why the FBI could not dismiss the possibility that Leslie knew what had happened but chose to stay silent. Another scenario the FBI considered was that Leslie had an argument with Betsy that day. No one knew exactly what transpired in the mansion, but the working theory was that the two may have clashed over inheritance issues or another subject related to Hackman. The confrontation may not have turned violent, but as tensions escalated, Betsy might have started feeling unwell. According to the medical report, Betsy died from Hirsch's pulmonary syndrome, a rare disease transmitted through rodent droppings and urine. The illness can develop quickly, causing severe respiratory distress within hours. This meant that Betsy could have begun showing symptoms while Leslie was still in the house. If Leslie was indeed present during this critical period, the most important question was, did she realize Betsy was in danger? And if so, why didn't she call for help? Gene Hackman's note, "Betsy is cold, but no one helped," became a vital clue. It indicated that Hackman sensed something was wrong with his wife, but perhaps he did not grasp the severity of the situation or was too disoriented to take action. The FBI outlined two main possibilities to explain why Leslie did nothing in this situation. Possibility 1, Leslie did not realize the severity of the situation. In this scenario, Leslie may have seen that Betsy looked unwell but did not believe it was life-threatening. The initial symptoms of Hirsch's virus can resemble a mild flu, headaches, slight breathing difficulties, and fatigue. If Leslie was unfamiliar with the disease, she might have misjudged the situation, assuming Betsy was just feeling unwell and would recover after some rest. This explanation aligned with reports stating that Leslie left the mansion calmly, showing no signs of distress or recognition that Betsy was in critical condition. If this was true, then although Leslie did not intentionally harm Betsy, her lack of awareness and misjudgment contributed to her stepmother's death. Possibility 2, Leslie knew, but she chose not to act. The second theory was far more serious. If Leslie realized that Betsy was in medical distress but deliberately chose not to call for help, then this was no longer just an accident, it was intentional neglect. The FBI examined whether the argument between Leslie and Betsy had escalated to the point where Leslie became angry and refused to help her stepmother. It was possible that when Betsy began struggling to breathe or losing control, Leslie had the opportunity to call for emergency assistance but deliberately ignored it. This did not mean Leslie directly caused Betsy's death, but her refusal to help, whether intentional or not, became a factor that ensured Betsy did not survive. Legally, there are cases where failing to act when capable of saving someone can be considered a form of misconduct. Whether Leslie had malicious intent or not, the final outcome remained the same: Betsy died without anyone helping her. 4. FBI and the investigation into Leslie Hackman. After Gene Hackman's unsent letter was discovered, the FBI began to realize that Betsy Arakawa's death was no longer just a simple family tragedy. The disjointed yet haunting words in the letter, combined with evidence found at the scene, raised a disturbing theory, one that suggested there was more to this case than initially believed. To uncover the truth, the FBI launched a comprehensive investigation to determine Leslie's real purpose for visiting the mansion that day and to analyze her suspicious behavior after leaving. The first step was to examine Leslie Hackman's communication history before and after February 11. Investigators reviewed her phone calls, text messages, emails, and any digital traces that could help piece together her actions. The data revealed that Leslie had not contacted her father for weeks before the crucial date, which was consistent with her initial statement that she hadn't visited him for months. However, security camera footage told a completely different story. A car linked to Leslie was seen near the mansion on February 11. This evidence proved that Leslie had lied about her whereabouts during that time. Additionally, the FBI investigated the financial disputes between Leslie and Gene Hackman, as one of the biggest potential motives for Leslie's confrontation with Betsy was inheritance issues. Close acquaintances of Hackman revealed that in his final years, he intended to leave most of his assets to Betsy, who had dedicated years to caring for him. This decision had angered Leslie, and she had expressed strong disapproval multiple times. Legal documents confirmed that Leslie had previously urged Hackman to reconsider his will, but he had refused. This raised the possibility that Leslie had visited the mansion on February 11 to persuade her father one last time, or even confront Betsy directly. As the FBI continued digging, they uncovered another suspicious detail. On the morning of February 12, a brief phone call was made from the landline inside Gene Hackman's mansion. The call lasted less than 5 seconds before being abruptly disconnected. This raised several critical questions. Who made the call? Did Gene Hackman attempt to call for help? If Hackman made the call, why was it cut off after just a few seconds? Was he disoriented, or did someone deliberately stop the call? Given Hackman's Alzheimer's, it was possible that he had tried to call for help but couldn't complete it due to confusion. However, a more unsettling theory emerged. If Leslie had seen this call happening, did she intentionally end it to ensure that no one found out what had happened at the mansion? If so, this was no longer an accident, it was an act of deliberate cover-up. The FBI also scrutinized Leslie's statements and found multiple inconsistencies when compared to physical evidence. Leslie had insisted that she had not been to the mansion in months, yet footprints found in the kitchen did not match Betsy's shoe size but were a close match to Leslie's. Her attempt to conceal her presence only heightened suspicions that she knew more than she was willing to admit. From these findings, the FBI posed several crucial questions. Was Leslie present at the mansion and aware of what happened but chose not to help Betsy? Did Gene Hackman write his letter in a state of panic after realizing that his daughter may have played a role in his wife's death? Betsy had died from Hiru's pulmonary syndrome, a highly dangerous disease that can cause rapid respiratory failure. If Leslie was there on February 11th, she might have witnessed Betsy showing symptoms but failed to take action. One possible scenario investigated by the FBI was that Leslie had an argument with Betsy, saw her stepmother's health deteriorating, but instead of calling for help, she left the mansion, leaving Betsy to die alone. If this was true, even if Leslie did not actively cause Betsy's death, her failure to act was deeply troubling. While there was no direct evidence to prove that Leslie intentionally let Betsy die, the FBI could not ignore the suspicious elements of her behavior. The FBI knew that the truth lay somewhere within the fragmented memories of Gene Hackman, and they needed to unravel the mystery before the trail went cold. Leslie's silence was not a confession, but it was more disturbing than any admission of guilt. If she knew the truth yet refused to reveal it, then this was no mere tragic accident, it was the result of cold indifference and calculated neglect. 5. The tragedy of a broken family. The FBI's investigation found no evidence of a traditional crime. There was no weapon, no signs of violence, and no direct act that caused the deaths of Betsy Arakawa and Gene Hackman. But that did not mean no wrongdoing had taken place. In this story, there was no murderer in the conventional sense, yet there was coldness, indifference, and a tragedy rooted in neglect so severe that it bordered on cruelty. Betsy's death was not a premeditated murder, but it could have been prevented had someone chosen to act in time. If Leslie had indeed been at the mansion on February 11th, and if she had seen Betsy in a weakened state, that meant she had the opportunity to save her, but she chose to do nothing. Leslie's silence after the incident only deepened suspicions that she had not merely failed to recognize Betsy's medical emergency, but that she may have deliberately refused to help. The FBI could not prove that Leslie wanted her stepmother dead, but they could see clearly that she had made no effort to save her. Under the law, inaction is not always considered a crime, but morally, it is the highest form of cruelty. This case was a reflection of a harsh reality. Betsy's death was not the result of violence, but of cold-hearted selfishness within a family. A family that should have been bound by love and protection had instead been torn apart by resentment and neglect. Gene Hackman, once one of the most commanding men on the Hollywood screen, spent his final years in helplessness. He was not only powerless against the Alzheimer's disease that was erasing his memory, but he was also powerless within his own family. He could not protect his wife. When Betsy died, Hackman did not know how to react. He may not have immediately realized that she was gone, or perhaps in brief moments of clarity, he tried to seek help but could not express himself clearly. He could not understand his daughter. Over the years, his relationship with Leslie had deteriorated, whether due to generational gaps, a lack of closeness from her childhood, or financial disputes later in life. What was clear, however, was that by the time of his death, Hackman no longer knew whether his daughter truly loved him. Had Leslie visited out of concern, or had she come only to ensure her financial interests? Gene Hackman's final letter was his last desperate plea for help, a message scrawled in the shaky handwriting of a man whose mind was crumbling away. In his last attempt to leave behind a message, he may have been trying to record a memory before it was lost forever. But perhaps the saddest part of it all was that no one listened. Gene Hackman's death was not just due to Alzheimer's. It was not merely the natural decline of old age. He did not die simply from illness, he died from loneliness. After Betsy's death, Hackman was left alone in the mansion for days, with no one checking in on him. No one called to see if he was okay. No one realized that the only person who had cared for him was gone. No one knocked on the door to ask, "Do you need help?" The tragedy was not how Hackman died, but how he was forgotten while he was still alive. The FBI, after piecing together the evidence, came to a chilling realization: Gene Hackman did not die from Alzheimer's, he died from confusion and a loss of trust in his own family. He died in a house that should have been his sanctuary, but instead, it became a prison of abandonment. He did not die because he was beyond saving, he died because no one was there to help him live. Leslie, the daughter who should have been the one to care for and protect her father in his final years, did nothing. She was not there when he needed her most. She did not reach out after Betsy died. She may have even seen Betsy in distress but chose to walk away in silence. And it was that silence that killed Hackman more than the disease that had been consuming his mind. This was a tragedy without a clear murderer. No knife, no gun, no physical violence. Yet it was still an inevitable death, not caused by old age, but by absolute solitude in a family where love no longer existed. The FBI may have closed the investigation without charging anyone, but the truth was undeniable: Betsy died because she was abandoned. Gene Hackman died because he lost the only person who loved him. And Leslie Hackman, whether she intended to or not, will forever remain the silent witness to a tragedy that should have never happened. Thank you for watching until the end of the video. The story of Gene Hackman's final letter is not just an investigation, it is a tragedy of loneliness, indifference, and irreparable family fractures. While no one was charged, the questions remain: did Leslie Hackman know more than she admitted? And could her silence be the most telling evidence of all? Share your thoughts in the comments, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on more compelling content. See you in the next video.